How much longer are you going to keep looking for peace out there when you have not been willing to build it within yourself? You fill your life with noise, with people, with distractions, with small doses of approval. And even so, there are nights when you are alone with yourself and you feel that uncomfortable emptiness that no one can cover up for you. That is the truth almost nobody wants to face head-on. What you lack is not company. What you lack is making peace with your own life. Because when you do not know how to be with yourself, you end up begging for presents, swallowing emotional crumbs, and calling happiness anything that distracts you from yourself. Stay with me. Gabriel here. Welcome to the Stoic Garden. Today we are going to walk through 9 Stoic principles for happiness and inner peace, 9 necessary wake-up calls to stop depending on outside noise and start building a life that stands on its own from within. And when you reach the last one, you are going to understand why true calm does not appear when the world embraces you, but when you finally learn not to abandon yourself. Let us begin. 1. Accept your solitude with dignity and stop begging for company. Let us begin with a truth that stings because it hits both pride and the wound at the same time. A lot of people are not afraid of being alone. They are afraid of feeling insignificant when nobody looks for them. That is why they accept empty conversations, lukewarm relationships, backup invitations, and connections where they have to put in twice the effort to receive half as much. They do not call it desperation, of course. They call it patience, understanding, a good attitude. But it is still emotional hunger dressed in elegant clothes. There is something deeply sad about watching a brilliant person lower themselves just to avoid the silence of a lonely night. It starts with answering right away to someone who never answers the same way. Then it becomes justifying absences that should not need justification. After that, it is smiling in places where they feel uncomfortable, just so they do not have to go home without a message on their phone. And little by little, they trade their peace for cheap company. As if any presence were better than their own. As if being with just anyone were more dignified than sitting with yourself and truly listening. No, brother. Not every embrace keeps you company, and not every silence is punishment. Solitude is not always abandonment. Sometimes it is a clearing out. Sometimes it is the empty room after removing from your life the people who brought noise, guilt, confusion, and crumbs. But you see that emptiness and get scared, because you still have not learned to tell the difference between absence and freedom. You were taught to believe that if you are not surrounded by people, something must be wrong with you. That if you spend a weekend alone, you have lost. That if you do not have a stack of messages waiting, you are worth less. What a ridiculous system. They measure your soul by notifications and then act surprised that you live with anxiety. Look honestly at your latest attempts to feel accompanied. How many came from real affection, and how many came from fear? How many times did you reach for someone not because you admired them, but because you could not stand being left with yourself? That question is uncomfortable because it leaves very little room for pretending, and the answer is usually brutal. Sometimes you do not miss the person. You miss the anesthesia. You do not want love. You want distraction. You do not want connection. You want not to feel the emptiness. And until you admit that, you will keep entering relationships the way someone walks into an emotional pharmacy, looking for quick relief for a problem that demands character. Dignity begins when you stop chasing what does not choose you clearly. When you understand that insisting where there is no reciprocity is not romantic, it is humiliating. There are people who want you close only as long as you are available, agreeable, understanding, and conveniently needy. The day you stand your ground, the day you stop begging, the day you stop sending that extra message that is always too much, they call you cold. How curious. While you were dragging yourself along, you were adorable. Once you respect yourself, suddenly you are difficult. Fine. It is not that you changed for the worse. It is that you stopped being useful to the people feeding on your insecurity. Learning to be alone does not mean turning to stone or looking down on others. It means stopping turning other people into crutches to walk through your own life. It means sitting down to eat without needing background noise so you do not have to hear yourself. Going for a walk without needing to tell anyone every step. Coming home and not feeling like you are walking into defeat, but into a space that belongs to you. That is where something powerful begins. Because when your own company stops embarrassing you, other people's company stops feeling like a desperate need. then you choose better. You no longer walk in out of hunger, you walk in with judgment. Cato the Younger, who was hardly a soft man or someone interested in pleasing the crowd, left a lesson that is more necessary today than ever. He preferred to stand firm in solitude rather than join the crowd in injustice. And that may not sound pretty printed on a coffee mug, but in real life it is worth gold. Because many times you join people, environments, or relationships that diminish you just so you do not feel left out. And being accompanied by people who degrade you is not belonging, it is deserting yourself in public. So begin with something simple and fierce at the same time. Stop calling it loneliness every time you finally have room to rebuild yourself. Stop begging for attention where you are barely tolerated. Stop giving your presence to people who receive it as if they were doing you a favor. Your peace cannot keep being negotiated out of fear of emptiness. Emptiness, used well, becomes clarity. And from that clarity, you discover something that changes the game. When you know how to be with yourself, just anyone who shows up to fill silence no longer dazzles you. And that brings us to the next point, because once you stop begging for company, you have to face something even more important, the voice that stays with you all day inside your head. 2. Practice wisdom and choose your thoughts before you believe them. This is where most people lose the battle without realizing it. They do not fall because of what happens outside. They fall because of the automatic interpretation they make of what happens. One unanswered message turns into rejection. One criticism turns into condemnation. One mistake turns into proof of uselessness. And in a matter of minutes, your mind stages a trial, hands down a sentence, and then forces you to live as if that story were true. Very efficient, yes, a disaster, but fast. Your mind does not always inform you. Very often it dramatizes things. And you, like a good spectator hypnotized by your own inner movie, swallow every scene without checking the script. You think something and immediately call it reality. You feel fear and immediately call it intuition. You compare yourself to someone else's life for 5 minutes and instantly decide that you are behind. It is incredible how easily you hand over the keys to your peace to a passing thought, as if every mental occurrence deserved respect. No, not everything that appears in your head deserves a seat at the table. Some ideas only come to make a mess. Epictetus, who taught philosophy the way someone teaches self-defense against a daily ambush, put it with brutal precision. Before you react, examine the impression that has come into your mind and ask whether it deserves your assent. What a gem. He did not say repress it, he did not say dramatize it, he did not say post it in 20 social media stories. He said examine it. That is practical wisdom, putting a thought under review before making it the owner of the house. Because an impression is not an order. A thought is not a command, an emotion is not an infallible compass. Think of how many times you ruined your own day by believing some absurd idea. They probably do not value me. I'm going to embarrass myself. I never change. Everyone is moving forward except me. And off you go, obediently acting according to that voice, as if it were an ancient sage and not a badly mannered echo of your insecurities. Are you really going to keep bowing to every thought that walks in without knocking? Are you really going to let one poorly formed inner sentence decide your mood, your actions, and even the way you speak to yourself? That is modern slavery, not visible chains, but the habit of obeying mentally without questioning. Stoic wisdom is not about emptying your mind or turning into an emotional statue. It is about learning to create a minimal but decisive distance between what you think and what you accept as true. That space saves you. That is where you stop reacting like a spring and start responding like an adult. That is where you discover that you are not obligated to follow every mental impulse, just as you are not obligated to follow every stranger who shouts something at you in the street. But with your mind, that is exactly what you do. A fearful idea appears, and you jump in behind it as if it were taking you somewhere intelligent. You have already seen where it leads you, exhausted and confused. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor and a man surrounded by real responsibilities, not imaginary nonsense, reminded himself that the happiness of life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Not the quantity, not the volume, not how dramatic they are when they appear. The quality. And quality means examination, judgment, inner clarity. It means asking whether that thought brings you closer to the truth or only feeds an old wound. It means noticing when your mind wants to turn a small discomfort into a full tragedy with a soundtrack. Because let us be honest, Sometimes you do not have a big problem. You have a poorly trained mind working overtime. Training that mind takes daily discipline. When the idea appears that you are not enough, do not embrace it so quickly. Ask where it comes from, what it is responding to, what real evidence supports it. When you feel that everything is going to go wrong, stop and see whether you are observing facts or inventing prophecies. When comparison takes over, remember that you are looking at display windows, not complete lives. And when guilt hits you for resting, setting a boundary, or not pleasing everyone, understand that very often it is not your conscience speaking. It is your conditioning protesting because it can no longer control you so easily. Donald Robertson, who has translated this Stoic training into modern psychological language, explains that identifying and reframing distorted thoughts is a current way of practicing that old discipline of assent. Put into plain everyday language. Stop blindly believing the first thing your mind whispers when it is tired, hurt, or afraid. Because a mind that goes unexamined turns assumptions into certainties and then calls the consequences destiny. And no, it was not destiny. It was a lack of inner vigilance. So starting today, do something that seems small but changes the entire course of a life. Before you believe a thought, look at it the way you would look at a doubtful witness. Without hatred, but without naivety. Not everything deserves your faith. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everything deserves to become your identity. Wisdom begins when you stop saying, "I think this, therefore it is true," and start saying, "I think this, let us see whether it passes the test." That is where you take back command. That is where clarity returns. And when a person learns to govern what they think, they stop living dragged around by whatever they feel in every moment. That prepares the ground for the next necessary blow, because it is not enough to think better if you keep chasing pleasures that leave you empty inside. 3. Train temperance and stop chasing pleasures that leave you empty afterward. This is where many people confuse freedom with whim. They think living well means always doing whatever feels good, following every impulse, rewarding themselves all the time, never denying themselves anything. It sounds modern, it sounds attractive, it even sounds rebellious, and it also sounds like the perfect recipe for a weak life, because a person who cannot say no to themselves ends up being a slave to whatever gives them quick relief. Then they wonder why they feel tired, scattered, empty, directionless. Such a hard mystery to solve, of course. Temperance is not bitterness or punishment. It does not mean living with a frown or giving up everything pleasant, as if suffering were a medal. It means something much more elegant and much harder, not letting pleasure rule you, eating without turning food into a refuge, resting without turning rest into avoidance, enjoying things without slipping into dependence, because the problem is not pleasure itself, but the place it occupies within you. When it starts working as constant compensation, you are no longer enjoying it, you are numbing yourself. And emotional numbness always sends the bill. Look honestly at those small behaviors that seem harmless. Opening your phone every 3 minutes so you do not have to think. Buying things you do not need just to feel a brief emotion. Looking for instant validation when you feel insecure. Eating from anxiety. Saying yes to plans, excesses, or habits you know throw you off balance just because you deserve it. That phrase has ruined more people than it seems. As if deserving something meant swallowing every impulse without a filter. As if rewarding yourself meant betraying yourself a little, but with background music and instant delivery. Seneca, who knew Roman excess well and the elegant self-deception of people who called themselves free while obeying their appetites, insisted that the man who is a slave to his pleasures cannot be master of himself. And you do not need to live in a Roman palace to prove it. Just look at daily life. There are people incapable of tolerating the slightest discomfort. If they get bored, they run to stimulation. If they get frustrated, they run to consumption. If they feel empty, they run to some shiny distraction. Always running, always filling, always avoiding the uncomfortable moment when they would have to sit with themselves and admit that something inside is asking for order, not entertainment. Temperance is trained precisely there, in that uncomfortable second between impulse and action. In that moment when you can choose not to obey automatically, it seems like little, but that is where character is built. That is where a person stops living at the mercy of what they feel and starts deciding according to what truly serves them. Because not everything that relieves helps. Not everything that gives pleasure nourishes. Not everything that feels good today deserves a place in your life tomorrow. Sometimes what makes you smile for 10 minutes costs you peace for a week. And here comes a question that stings because it tears apart a lot of excuses. When you say you cannot let go of a certain habit, a certain excess, a certain compulsive search for pleasure, is it really that you cannot, or that you do not want to go through the discomfort of changing? Because most of the time the problem is not inability, it is consent. You have made a pact with what weakens you because it offers quick gratification. It steals your strength, yes, but it gives you an immediate caress. And so you keep surrendering yourself in small installments. No one destroys themselves all at once. They wear themselves down through repeated concessions. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's teacher, and a man not easily impressed by human excuses, taught that training the soul is like training the body. Without discipline, there is no strength. Not to make you rigid, but to make you steady. And steadiness means your well-being does not depend on satisfying every desire that appears. It means you can say enough without feeling like the world is ending. It means you can choose simplicity without feeling punished. Strange how unusual that has become in a time that sells weakness packaged as self-love. Start by reclaiming small, conscious acts of renunciation. Not to prove anything, but to remind yourself that you are still in charge. Give up an unnecessary pleasure from time to time. Tolerate silence without rushing to fill it. Eat with moderation. Rest with purpose. Use things without letting them use you. At first it is irritating, of course. Your mind protests like a spoiled child who finally had the remote control taken away. But then something valuable happens. Your strength returns. Your clarity returns. Your self-respect returns. Because temperance does not take life away from you, it gives you back the government of your life. And with that recovered self-government, there is an inevitable next step. 4. Set firm boundaries and learn to say no without guilt. This point stings especially for good people, or rather, for people who have confused kindness with unlimited availability. They got used to being there for everyone, fixing things, giving in, understanding, enduring, staying quiet so they would not make anyone uncomfortable. And then one day they feel exhausted, resentful, invisible. But they still have the nerve to wonder why, because you have turned your kindness into permission for others to invade your time, your energy, and your peace. It really is that simple. And as long as you keep calling that constant self-abandonment love, people will keep draining you with a smile. Setting boundaries does not make you cruel, it makes you clear. And clarity bothers the people who are very comfortable taking advantage of your confusion. There are people who do not want your well-being, they want access to you. They want to be able to call you when it suits them, dump their problems on you, ask you for favors at all hours, take up your attention as if it belonged to them. And you, just to avoid looking bad, say yes, even though everything inside you tightens up. You smile while swallowing your annoyance. You help while the anger piles up. You give in while abandoning yourself. What an elegant combination for manufacturing moral exhaustion. The problem is that you are taught to feel guilty every time you protect yourself, as if saying no were betrayal, as if creating distance were selfishness, as if needing space made you a bad person. But tell me something. What good is your generosity if it comes from fear? What value does your help have if inside you are saying yes with your lips and no with your soul? That is not virtue, that is people-pleasing. And people-pleasing always comes with a hidden price. Resentment, exhaustion, loss of identity. Because every no you fail to say in time turns into a silent wound against yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the nature of each thing is preserved when it fulfills its function with integrity. Yours is not to be anyone's emotional doormat. Yours is not to be available to everyone while your inner world runs out of air. Fulfilling your role in life justly also means protecting your boundaries, because an overwhelmed person can no longer serve others well or serve themselves well. And this is not pretty theory. You see it in your schedule, in your body, in your mood, in the way you reach the end of the day feeling like you are everywhere except with yourself. Learning to say no without guilt requires a small inner revolution. You have to accept that not everyone will understand your change. Some will get upset. Others will accuse you of having changed, as if growing up were some kind of offense. Others will try to make you feel selfish so they can regain the control they used to have over your time and emotions. That is where you find out whether your boundary was real or just decorative. Because setting boundaries when no one protests is easy. The hard part is holding them when manipulation shows up disguised as disappointment. There is a rather bitter irony in all this. Very often you are afraid to say no because you fear losing certain people, but what you really lose by not saying it is yourself. You lose rest, you lose focus, you lose authenticity. You become a version of yourself that is functional, pleasant, useful, and deeply disconnected from its own needs. And for what? So you can keep being approved by people who only want you accessible. That is not affection. That is convenience with good lighting. Epictetus taught that no one can force you internally without your consent. And although he was speaking about the freedom of judgment, that also touches your relationships. Very often, it is not the other person's demands that rule you. It is your need for approval. It is not their request that enslaves you. It is your terror of disappointing them. That is why the work is not only about learning firm phrases, but about tolerating the discomfort of not being liked by everyone. That is where a real boundary is born. Not when you rehearse perfect answers in front of the mirror, but when you can handle someone getting irritated because they can no longer use you the same way. Start by doing what you should have done a long time ago. Reply later when you need space. Turn down what you cannot carry without betraying yourself. Do not over-explain. Do not decorate every boundary with endless apologies, as if protecting your peace were a diplomatic crime. A clear and respectful no is worth more than a resentful yes. And when you learn that, something interesting happens. You stop treating yourself like the last resort in your own life. Then you really can move to the next level, because after setting boundaries outwardly, you have to look at how you treat yourself inwardly and how you treat others too, without humiliating yourself or trying to dominate. 5. Act with justice toward yourself and others, without humiliating yourself or dominating anyone. Because there is a very common trap in adult life that almost no one catches in time. You spend years trying not to hurt others, trying to be right, decent, considerate, and in that effort you end up tolerating things you should never tolerate, or you swing to the other extreme. You harden yourself, you put up armor, you become cold, controlling, proud, and you call strength what is really just fear in armor. Stoic justice lives in neither of those extremes. It is not about kneeling down or stepping on people. It is about standing in your place with dignity and treating others from that same center. Being fair to yourself means stopping speaking to yourself as if you were an enemy who needs to be corrected through punishment. A lot of people make mistakes and punish themselves with a cruelty they would never use on another person. They get one thing wrong and call themselves useless. They fail at something and condemn themselves completely. They demand zero rest, total perfection, flawless results, constant maturity, endless patience. And when they cannot reach that ridiculous fantasy, they despise themselves. Then they brag about being self-aware. No, that is not self-awareness. That is inner abuse with sophisticated vocabulary. But be careful, because doing justice to yourself does not mean excusing everything or turning yourself into a fragile creature no one is allowed to challenge. It also means holding yourself accountable with honesty, keeping your word, admitting when you failed, repairing the damage when you hurt someone, stopping the use of your wounds as a license to behave badly. Because there are also people who ask for understanding in everything, but take responsibility for nothing. They want tenderness without discipline. They want acceptance without correction. They want the world to understand their reasons while they never examine their actions. That is not justice either. That is emotional immaturity with good marketing. Justice toward others begins when you understand that no one gives you the right to humiliate because you feel strong, or to manipulate because you feel hurt. There are people who, after being trampled on, swear they will never let that happen again, and end up becoming more polished versions of the very thing that harmed them. They no longer humiliate themselves, great, but now they dominate. They no longer stay silent, but now they crush. They no longer always give in, but now they impose everything. They changed extremes and think they evolved. No, they just went from victims to executioners with a self-help speech. Hierocles, a less quoted but very lucid Stoic, spoke about widening our circles of concern, bringing others closer into the sphere of moral respect. In real-life terms, do not turn anyone into an object for use, not even when you are upset, disappointed, or tired. The fact that the other person is wrong does not authorize you to degrade them, and the fact that you have character does not make you anyone's supreme judge. Treating people justly means speaking clearly without cruelty, setting boundaries without contempt, correcting without enjoying the power that comes with correcting. And here comes an uncomfortable question. How many times have you sacrificed yourself to be a good person only to build up resentment and then explode unfairly? That happens a lot. You stay quiet too long, swallow too much, endure too much, and when you cannot take it anymore, you let all the anger out at once. Then you tell yourself you had every right. Yes, maybe you had reasons, but having endured too much does not make every reaction noble. Justice is not only about speaking up when you explode. It is about stopping the situation before it gets there, acting earlier, speaking earlier, putting yourself in your place earlier. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that what is right should be done without theatre, without vanity, and without bitterness. And that lesson is still exact. Do what must be done because it must be done. Not to look saintly, not to inspire fear, not to collect moral superiority. A just person does not need to put on a show. You can see it in how they treat the waiter, the stranger, the friend, the person who contradicts them, and also in how they treat themselves when no one is watching. That is the real test, because anyone looks virtuous when everything is going their way. Acting with justice means stopping the sale of your worth just to be accepted, but also stopping the use of your strength to feel above others. It means correcting without humiliating, defending yourself without dirtying yourself, giving without emptying yourself, receiving without submitting yourself. And when you finally understand that, something settles inside you. You stop living at war with others and with yourself. Then a new need appears, almost inevitably, to sustain that peace with structure. Because peace without habits is just a beautiful intention that falls apart on the first chaotic day. 6. Put your habits in order and build peace through routine, not luck. This is where the people who want a calmer life separate themselves from the people who actually build one, because everyone says they want peace, of course. But then, they live without a bedtime, without order, without standards, without basic discipline, improvising every day as if chaos were a form of authenticity. And no, you are not free because you do everything at random. Very often you are just disorganized, and that disorganization steals your energy, your clarity, and your stability, while you cover it up with pretty phrases about going with the flow. Inner peace does not fall from the sky like some mystical dove that one day decides to land on your head. Peace is built, protected, repeated, turned into habit. It is in how you start the morning, in how you use your attention, in what you eat, in how much you sleep, in the kind of stimuli you allow in the small decisions that seem insignificant but shape your real life. The problem is that many people want well-being with self-sabotaging habits. They want calm while staying on screens until the middle of the night. They want focus with a fragmented mind. They want balance while living in reaction to everything. That is not how it works. Routine is not a prison when it is well built. It is a structure that saves you unnecessary wear and tear. It keeps you from having to negotiate with yourself all the time. It removes 1,000 pointless decisions that consume your willpower. Because every day you leave your well-being up to your mood in the moment, you condemn yourself to a fragile version of yourself. Today, you meditate if you feel inspired. Today, you rest if you absolutely cannot take it anymore. Today, you eat better if you woke up motivated. Today, you turn off your phone early if your anxiety allows it. In other words, there is never any self-government, only better-dressed impulses. Seneca repeated that fortune does not give virtue, it merely offers occasion. Character, on the other hand, is forged through deliberate repetition. And that is exactly the point. Your peace cannot depend on the week going smoothly, on no one contradicting you, on everything arranging itself, on the universe waking up ready to cooperate with you. That is not peace. That is dependence on pleasant circumstances. Stoic peace has a different texture. It is more like a well-built house in the middle of changing weather. Outside there may be noise. Inside there is structure. Look at your habits honestly, not with guilt, with honesty. What are you doing every day that takes more from you than it gives? What do you keep repeating even though you know it leaves you worse off? Where are you expecting different emotional results from routines that maintain exactly the same disorder? Sometimes anxiety does not need deep interpretation. It needs you to go to bed at a decent hour. Sometimes your irritability is not an existential trait. It is accumulated exhaustion. Sometimes your feeling of emptiness does not require some great spiritual revelation, but simply stopping living as if your body and mind were disposable tools. Musonius Rufus insisted that philosophy should be visible in daily life, in the way you eat, sleep, work, and conduct yourself. Not in grand speeches, in the concrete, in repetition, in simplicity. And that bothers people today because we are addicted to intense, fast, exciting solutions. We want a dramatic turn, a life-changing experience, a video that resets the soul in 20 minutes. But real transformation is usually more humble and less glamorous. It looks like going to bed earlier, taking walks without excuses, tidying your space, reducing the noise, stopping the negotiation with your own commitments as if you were some cheap politician promising changes you have no intention of keeping. And here comes reality's sarcasm. You say you want a peaceful life, but your habits look like they were designed by someone who hates you a little. You sleep badly, eat carelessly, fill your mind with constant stimulation, postpone what matters, live putting out fires, and then feel surprised when you are overwhelmed. Truly admirable, this human ability to create storms and then ask the sky for explanations. Routine does not take away your spontaneity, it gives you a foundation back. And without a foundation, any foolish emotion can wreck your whole day. Start with what is simple and hold on to it with dignified stubbornness. Set basic times. Reduce the noise you do not need. Repeat the actions that bring order to your life, even if they do not excite you. Make peace with the fact that many good things in life do not feel epic while you are building them. They feel ordinary. And that is exactly why they save you, because they make peace something less spectacular, but far more dependable. And when your life starts to have structure, the next unavoidable challenge appears, using that foundation to face what you have been putting off for far too long. 7. Practice courage and face overdue conversations without fear. Because some silences are not peace, they are cowardice dressed up nicely. Silences that do not come from wisdom, but from fear of making people uncomfortable, fear of losing something, fear of looking bad, fear of discovering that the relationship, the situation, or the image you were holding on to was far more fragile than you wanted to admit. So you stay quiet. You put it off. You circle around it. You rehearse imaginary scenes in your head while in real life you say nothing. And that price is expensive, because what you do not face in time does not disappear. It rots inside you. There are conversations you know you have needed to have for months. Sometimes with a partner, sometimes with a friend, sometimes with a family member, sometimes with yourself, because you are also an expert at avoiding yourself when a truth threatens your comfort. You know something is not right. You know there is a wound, an abuse, a distance, a disappointment, a small lie that has already become part of the structure. But you would rather keep functioning on autopilot than lay the cards on the table. After all, as long as nobody names the problem, you can pretend it still does not exist. Admirable strategy. Childish, exhausting, but very popular. Stoic courage is not about feeling no fear. It is about refusing to obey fear as if it were a king. Because fear speaks loudly, yes, but it does not always speak with reason. It paints catastrophes, exaggerates consequences, dramatizes other people's reactions, convinces you it is better to endure a little longer, wait for the perfect moment, avoid any tension, let things settle on their own. And so a week passes, then a month, then a year. The overdue conversation is still there, breathing down your neck. Your body knows it, which is why you tense up. Your mind knows it, which is why you feel scattered. Your soul knows it, which is why peace never fully settles. Seneca wrote that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality, and all you have to do is look at what happens before a difficult conversation to understand it. You build an entire courtroom in your head. You project rejection, shouting, breakups, shame, endless discomfort. But many times when you finally speak, you discover that the monster was smaller than your mind had painted it. And other times, yes, the conversation hurts. Yes, the relationship changes. Yes, the truth is uncomfortable. But even then there is a huge gain. You stop living bent under the weight of what has not been said. Ask yourself something seriously. How much energy have you spent sustaining what you should have faced already? How much strain does it create to keep being diplomatic with a situation that is breaking you inside? Everyday cowardice does not always look like running away. Sometimes it looks like excessive politeness, like endless patience, like, "It is not worth bringing up right now. like a functional little smile while inside you keep collecting knots. And then, of course, people say you exploded out of nowhere. It was not out of nowhere. It came from cowardly silence repeated for far too long. Courage does not ask you to shout or dramatize or turn every disagreement into a holy war. It asks something more demanding, to speak clearly without trembling before the truth, to say what you need to say without cruelty, but also without hiding behind weak euphemisms. Because many people do not speak clearly and then complain about not being understood. They hint, suggest, throw out indirect comments, wait for the other person to guess. No, brother, maturity does not work by telepathy. If something matters, you name it. If something hurts, you express it. If something is over, you end it with clean words. Epictetus taught that some things are up to us and some are not. Your courage is up to you. The other person's reaction is not. And that distinction sets you free. Because a difficult conversation is not measured by whether it goes perfectly, but by whether you entered it with truth, dignity, and presence. You do not control whether the other person listens, grows, or responds well. But you do control whether you stop betraying yourself out of fear of the outcome. And that is already an enormous moral victory. So stop waiting for the ideal moment because it almost never comes. Most important conversations happen with your voice a little tense, your heart beating a little faster, and your certainty still incomplete. Even so, you have them. Even so, you sit down, look straight ahead and speak. Because every time you do, your character stands a little straighter, and every time you keep running, your self-respect notices. Courage does not eliminate the shaking. It moves through it. And after moving through that fear, another necessary freedom appears, one that is silently poisoning millions of people today. 8. Let go of comparison and stop measuring your life against other people's lives. Few things destroy inner peace so thoroughly while enjoying such a good social reputation. Comparison has almost become a reflex. You see someone moving ahead and you question yourself. You see someone enjoying life and you feel behind. You see someone standing out and you shrink. And all of that without knowing half their story, without knowing what they carry, what they sacrifice, what they pretend, what they keep quiet about. But there you are, using edited fragments of other people's lives to pass judgment on your own. A disastrous bargain, to put it plainly. Comparison starts from a very impoverished idea, that your worth depends on how you look next to other people, that you are doing well only if you are not behind, that you deserve peace only if you have more, achieve more, are liked more, produce more, or shine more. It is an absurd race because the finish line keeps moving. There will always be someone faster, more admired, younger, richer, more visible, more celebrated. If you make that the standard for your well-being, you are condemned to live with a constant sense of insufficiency. And the worst part is that this insufficiency does not even come from your reality, but from a distorted measurement you yourself accepted. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself that he should not be distracted by watching too closely what others were doing, saying or thinking, unless it was necessary in order to act justly. Today, that kind of discipline would almost be an act of rebellion. Because we live in a time that trains you to monitor other people's lives until you forget your own. You know the other person's vacations, the other person's achievements, the other person's partner, the other person's progress, the other person's body, the other person's house, the other person's smile. And meanwhile, your relationship with yourself keeps growing poorer. So much attention directed outward, and so little life being built inward. Comparison is also deceptive because it never compares cleanly. You are not placing two complete realities side by side. You are placing your daily chaos next to the other person's most presentable moment. You compare your doubts with their confident pose, your slow process with their visible result, your scars with their emotional makeup. How could you not lose on a scale like that? It is like looking at a shop window and concluding that your kitchen is a failure because it does not look like a magazine. The comparing mind does exactly that. It takes someone else's surface and uses it to despise your own inner life. And here comes a necessary question. What part of your life have you neglected to cultivate because you were too busy watching other people's? Because that is the real cost. Not only do you feel worse, you also distract yourself from what you actually could be doing. Instead of working on your own path, you stand by the roadside watching to see who passes you. Instead of being grateful for what you are already building, you minimize it because it does not match someone else's mold. Instead of respecting your pace, you insult yourself for not fitting into a schedule that never belonged to you. Epictetus warned that when we admire externals too much, we hand over our freedom, and comparison does exactly that. It gives your peace away to external indicators: applause, status, appearance, validation, visible progress. Everything that depends partly on the world starts governing your inner state, and then you are no longer living, you are evaluating yourself. You are no longer experiencing your path, you are judging it. You are no longer grateful for what you have. You are diminishing it because it does not compete well. An incredibly elegant way to ruin your life without lifting a finger. Letting go of comparison does not mean giving up admiration, learning, or inspiration. It means stopping the use of other people's lives as a weapon against your own. You can recognize someone else's brilliance without turning it into proof of your lack. You can applaud without feeling smaller. You can learn without degrading yourself. That takes character, because a wounded ego wants to turn every other person's talent into a threat. But when you mature, you understand that existence is not a uniform competition where everyone is running on the same track. Every life has different burdens, timing, debts, talents, losses, and callings. Comparing them as if they were identical is not discipline. It is clumsiness. Start looking less in order to measure and more in order to live. Reduce your exposure to whatever triggers that sterile hunger for validation. Return to your own process. Honor your pace. Do your work better, care for your mind, strengthen your character, and let others walk their path without turning it into a courtroom against you. Because peace returns when you stop examining your worth through borrowed eyes, and when you finally let go of that obsession with comparing yourself. The last step remains, the most important one of all. 9. Become your own best company and live with daily purpose. This is where the journey ends, but it is also where the most serious part begins. Because after accepting solitude, ordering your mind, tempering your impulses, setting boundaries, acting with justice, putting your habits in order, facing overdue conversations and letting go of comparison, one question remains that almost no one asks honestly. When everything goes quiet, when no one distracts you, when there is no applause, no messages, no urgency, no noise, who are you to yourself? That answer defines far more of your happiness than any outside circumstance ever will. Being your own best company does not mean locking yourself inside a narcissistic bubble or repeating pretty phrases in the mirror while your life remains a mess. It means your own presence does not weigh on you. It means you can inhabit yourself without running away. It means you do not need to escape from yourself the moment free time appears, because there are people who cannot stand being with themselves for even 10 minutes without stimulation. They need music, a screen, a chat, background noise, movement, something, anything, just to avoid the uncomfortable meeting with their own inner world. And then, of course, they say they are looking for peace. But peace begins exactly there, in stopping the habit of running from your own company as if you were an uninhabitable place. To achieve that, you need purpose. Not something grandiose, theatrical, or messianic. You do not need to feel like you came to change human history before breakfast. You need something more grounded and much more powerful, to know what you are living for today, what kind of person you are trying to become, what small but real duty belongs to you, what action makes you worthy at the end of the day. Because a life without daily purpose rots in distractions. It fills up with false obligations, attractive noise, and meaningless exhaustion. You do many things, yes, but none of them gather you inwardly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself upon waking that he had been born to do the work proper to a human being. And that phrase, spoken by an emperor who had real problems and not just a crowded schedule, still lands with force. Waking up with purpose does not mean living at high speed. It means living with direction. Knowing that your day cannot be reduced to reacting to messages, putting out fires, chasing dopamine, and reaching nightfall with the vague feeling that you survived another shift. That is not life. That is biological maintenance with a calendar. Become someone whose company is breathable because they speak to themselves truthfully, treat themselves with respect, and conduct themselves with direction. That is not improvised. It is built in the details, in how you speak to yourself when you fail, in how you use your time when no one is watching, in what you choose to do with a free afternoon, in what you prioritize when you could easily numb yourself instead. Do you see why this matters so much? Because in the end, you will not always be able to choose who stays, who leaves, who understands you, who disappoints you, who keeps you company. But you can choose whether you will go on being a stranger to yourself or finally become a home for yourself. Epictetus taught that no one is free if they do not govern themselves. And governing yourself is not about living rigidly or perfectly, but about living present, aware of what matters. Being able to be alone without feeling punished. Being able to work on something valuable without needing constant approval. Being able to enjoy things without losing yourself. Being able to rest without guilt. Being able to look in the mirror without feeling that you are seeing someone who has betrayed you too many times. That is a form of happiness far more solid than euphoria. Quieter, yes. Much truer too. So stop waiting for life to send you someone who will complete you, rescue you, or give you the peace you have not cultivated. That role belongs to no one else. It belongs to you. And far from being a sentence, that is an immense liberation. Because when you become your own best company, the world stops feeling like a desperate marketplace of validation. Your relationships improve, silence stops frightening you, your decisions become clearer, and daily purpose stops feeling like a burden and becomes a compass instead. That is where happiness stops depending so much on what arrives and starts depending on what you sustain. And with that, we come to the close because understanding this changes the way you live at its roots. It is no longer about chasing peace like someone chasing an impossible butterfly, but about building an inner life so steady that peace has somewhere to stay. If you made it this far, you have already seen that happiness is not a prize the world hands you once everything finally goes the way you wanted. It is a way of being with yourself, of governing yourself, of stopping the begging, of thinking clearly, of living with boundaries, order, courage, and purpose. It was not a lack of luck. It was a lack of inner direction. And as hard as that may sound, it is also good news, because it means you can still do something with your life starting today. Tell me in the comments which of these 9 principles hit you the hardest, and which one you need to start practicing right away. I want to read you. And if this video held up a mirror and helped you put something in order inside yourself, subscribe to the Stoic Garden and join me for the next ones. We are not here to decorate wounds with pretty phrases. We are here to build character. Remember this when the video ends, and you return to the usual noise. If you do not learn how to live well with yourself, nothing you achieve out there will ever be enough. But when you make peace with yourself, when you stop abandoning yourself, even difficult days stop breaking you completely. That is where a deeper kind of peace begins. Cleaner, stronger, more your own. See you in the next video.